Hey guys, welcome to this tutorial on dependency injection in React. In this video, we will learn how to implement the dependency injection design pattern in a React application using a dynamic approach. We will start by creating a context to store the dependencies and a provider component to provide the dependencies to the consumer components. Then we will use the useContext hook to inject the dependencies into a consumer component. We will also learn how to add multiple logger service implementations and how to inject the type of logger dependency by reading from a .env file. So without wasting any more time, let's get started with our code. The first thing that I will do is I will create a new folder for the context and I will now add a new file inside it and I will call it dependency provider.js. Now inside it, first I am going to import React and I will also import useContext. So we will be needing these to create our dependency provider. Next we have to create a dependency context. So to do that, we just need to do react.create context. After doing that, we have to create a dependency provider, so we also have to export it. So let's just create a function and we are going to name it as dependency provider. Now we are going to use this dependency provider to provide the dependencies that our component needs, which this dependency provider is going to wrap. So for example, if we want to inject a service into all of the components, then we can provide it as a prop to this dependency provider along with the children. Now from over here, we just have to return a dependency context dot provider and it will have the children or the child component, and we will pass the value of this context as an object which is going to contain this my service that we will provide as a prop to this dependency provider or to this dependency context. Next we need to create a use dependency hook and we also need to export it so that our child components can use this context's values. So for that, I'm going to create a function and let's just call it as use dependency, and this is going to return use context dependency context. And that is everything we need to do for now for our dependency context. The next thing that I will do is I will create a new folder and let's just call it as components. Inside it, I will create a new file which is going to be a component. So I'm just going to name it as my component.jsx. Let me just close this left pane and now I will use the shortcut to generate a functional component boilerplate. Now inside this my component, first we are going to import the use dependency hook that we created. So use dependency, and then we are going to destructure the my service from this dependency provider or from using the use dependency hook. So const my service equals to use dependency. But you must be thinking, how can we provide this my service as a prop to this dependency provider? But before that, let's just finish the code of this my component where we will use this my service. So this service is going to have the methods to do a lot of stuff, but because this is just a code example to see how we can inject dependencies into components using a dependency provider, we can just add any function to this test service. So I'm just going to add a function call me that I will be doing in a while, and that's pretty much everything that we need to do in my component. Now let's open up app.js file and I'm going to remove this header from over here. In this app.js, I will import two things. First, I will import my component and then I will also import the dependency provider. Now what I will do is I am just going to, let me just remove everything. First I will add the dependency provider, and then I will add the my component as a child of this dependency provider component. Now it's time to provide the my service as a prop to this dependency provider, and for that we can just create an object like this. So const my service equals to, so this is an object. I'm just going to add the call me function. So call me, this can be an arrow function. So inside it I'm just going to log to the console a message that this is some, how do we remove it? Yep, dependency, right? And now to provide this my service as a prop, we just have to, provide it as a normal prop. It's pretty straightforward. So our work is done. This is just the basic part. We will come to the main stuff of using dynamic dependency injection, but before that let's see if this code is working or not. So I will open up the terminal by using Ctrl plus backtick, and I will run the command npm start. So this is our application, and let's now open up the console. You can see that this is some dependency is being printed in the console. So right now this code is kind of very basic. We are just creating an object and then we are providing it as a prop to this dependency provider. We can do this normally with any component as well, or we can import the dependency directly into the component as well. Then what is the use of using context altogether? Now I will show you how things can get interesting from over here. Suppose that we want to log any actions which are being performed in the components, and for that we are going to need a logger service. So for that I am going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it as dependencies. Inside this dependencies folder I will add a new file. So I'm going to name it as logger.js. So in this logger we are going to provide the implementations of a couple of logger classes. So export class, and we also need to export them, so we are using the export keyword. So export class, suppose that we want a logger which is going to log messages to the console. So console logger, a log message, so message, and then console.log message. Now suppose that we need another logger that we may need to use from time to time, which is going to log the messages to the alert box, or it is going to show any message in the form of browser window alerts. So to do that we just have to remove this console.log and replace it with an alert. Now our logger classes are ready, but how do we use them, or how do we switch them dynamically based on environment? For that we need to create a .env file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a .env file in the root folder. Actually not in this dependencies folder, we have to come all the way out and then .env. Now in this .env we can provide our environment variables. So with create react app we get the ability to read the environment variables from a .env file automatically without using any kind of package like .env. We just have to use the prefix react_app_ for any kind of environment variable name. So the name is going to be logger_type, and suppose that we want to use the console logger, so I'm just going to write console over here. So our .env file is ready, and now it's time to use this environment variable to inject a logger dependency into our dependency provider. For that I am going to open up the dependency provider.js file. So the first thing that I will do is I will create a map object. So to map the variable name with the classes. So logger implementations equals to new object. So we have two loggers, or two types of loggers, console logger. So for that we will need a console logger, and and see that whenever I am typing the name, then VS Code is automatically adding the import statements, so I don't have to go and do them manually. So second one is the alert logger, so alert logger. All right, now to use these logger implementations based on what is there in the .env file, we just have to create a new constant. Let me just close this left pane and scroll up so that you guys can see clearly. So const logger implementation equals to logger implementations, and then we have to provide the property name, or basically the key for this map. So the key is going to be process.env, and then the property name, which if you remember, it was React app logger type. So process.env, let me just close this again, logger type, and then we can create the logger instance by simply calling new logger implementation, and then we can provide this logger or add this logger to the dependency context's value object like this. Now to use it, we can go to the my component, and then while destructuring it, we can destructure the logger implementation or the logger instance as well. And to use it, I'm going to use an effect function. So for that, we have to use the use effect dependency. So use effect, provide the callback function. So this should only run when the component loads for the first time. So logger.log, this is a message. Now the thing about using a .env file is that we have to restart the application. So I'm just going to press Ctrl C, and then I'm going to write npm start again. So here is our app running. Now let's see the console. So the message that we logged is here, but it is being logged twice. The reason for that, I think, is because inside index.js, the app is wrapped inside strict mode component. So I'm just going to comment it out. Now let's check again. So this time you can see that the message is printing in the console only once. Now it's time to switch the logger dependency to use an alert logger, and for that we have to open up the .env file and replace console with alert. And remember, to reflect the .env file changes, we have to restart our server. So npm start. This time when the application loads, then the message is in a browser alert box over here. This is a message. I just hope that you can see it. It's pretty small, but yeah, you get the idea, right? Over here we are switching only the logger implementation being used in the .env file, and my component will keep on functioning as it is without doing any kind of code changes to either the my component or to the dependency provider or to the app.js file where we are injecting other dependencies in the form of props. In conclusion, we learned how to implement the dependency injection design pattern in a React application using a dynamic approach. We created a context to store the dependencies and a provider component to provide the dependencies to the consumer component. And then we also learned how to add multiple logger service implementations and how to inject the type of logger by reading from a .env file. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below. Thanks for watching.